The psychological reason adult children turn against their parents. The greatest burden a child must bear is the unlived life of the parent. Carl Jung. Welcome back to Spiritual Wisdom. Today, we're diving into one of the most painful and misunderstood experiences a parent can face: when an adult child turns away. In this video, we explore the deep psychological forces often hidden in the unconscious that shape distance, resentment, and silence within families. More importantly, we uncover what these patterns mean for your own healing, growth, and emotional freedom. As you listen, I invite you to reflect on your own story. Have you ever experienced this kind of emotional separation, either as a parent or as a child? Share your thoughts in the comments below, because your voice may bring comfort to someone who feels alone. Let's begin this journey toward clarity, compassion, and inner peace. 1. The pain of parental abandonment. Of all human heartbreaks, few cut as deeply as watching your own children pull away. Because when a parent who once gave everything now sits in front of a silent phone or an empty doorway, it feels like the universe has collapsed into a single unanswered question. Why did the people I loved the most choose to leave me behind? Yet Carl Jung reminds us that the greatest burden a child must bear is the unlived life of the parent. And through this lens, the distance between parent and child becomes not just an act of rejection, but a complex psychological and spiritual response to years of unspoken emotional weight. Many adult children do not wake up one day and suddenly decide to abandon their parents. Instead, this distance forms slowly through unresolved conflicts, repeated moments of feeling unheard, years of subtle criticism, or the quiet expectation that they must sacrifice their own identity to maintain harmony. What looks like coldness is often the child's attempt to breathe, because for some, every interaction triggers old wounds: guilt, pressure, comparison, or the feeling that love must be earned rather than freely given. And when the nervous system associates a parent with emotional danger instead of emotional safety, withdrawal becomes a form of survival. From the outside, the parent may only see disrespect, ingratitude, or sudden disinterest. But underneath, the adult child may be fleeing from patterns that shaped their entire upbringing. Patterns the parent may not even realize existed. Jung warned that nothing shapes a child more than the parts of a parent's life the parent refused to face, and many children carry not just their own pain, but the emotional burdens their parents never resolved. Loneliness masked as control, fear disguised as criticism, disappointment hidden inside high expectations. When this weight becomes too heavy, separation becomes not an attack, but a desperate act of self-preservation. Spiritually, some souls choose families that challenge them in the deepest ways so that they may awaken, break generational cycles, and rediscover their true identity beyond the roles placed upon them. This process of spiritual awakening can appear harsh, especially to the parent who feels abandoned, but on a soul level, it is an attempt to heal wounds that have echoed across generations. For many parents, this distance feels like betrayal, yet it is often the result of misunderstandings that accumulated over years. A child who was constantly told to be strong may now avoid the parent because they were never allowed to be vulnerable. A child who was scolded for expressing emotions may now protect themselves through silence. A child who was expected to care for a parent's feelings, may now cut contact to finally build their own life without carrying emotional debts they never chose. This does not mean the parent was intentionally hurtful. It means the emotional landscape of the family was shaped by unspoken rules, survival patterns, and inherited pain that no one was taught how to navigate. But when the parent dares to look inward instead of only outward, something transformative happens. The question shifts from, "Why are they doing this to me?" to "What pain have they been carrying that I have never truly seen?" And this shift opens the door to healing for both. Spirituality teaches that relationships act as mirrors, reflecting the parts of ourselves we avoid. And having your own child turn away is one of the harshest mirrors life can hold up, forcing you to confront not only who they are, but who you became through years of habit, fear, and unexamined patterns. This reflection is not meant to punish, but to awaken. Because even small shifts in awareness, learning to listen without defense, apologizing without justification, and acknowledging the emotions that were overlooked can begin to soften years of tension. Even if the child is not ready to return, the parent's inner work is never wasted, because change occurs first in energy before it appears in physical form. And when a parent commits to understanding, healing, and releasing old patterns, the emotional atmosphere of the relationship begins to shift. In the end, the distance between a parent and a child is rarely rooted in a single event. It is woven from unmet needs, unspoken truths, inherited wounds, and the difficult psychological process of carving out identity. While the past cannot be rewritten, the present can become a turning point when approached with humility, honesty, and a sincere desire to break the cycle. Because even in the silence, connection is not lost. It is waiting for the moment when both souls are ready to meet again in truth rather than in pain. 2. Common reasons for estrangement. When adult children turn away from their parents, the reasons are rarely simple. And Carl Jung's psychology shows us that estrangement often grows from emotional wounds that were never understood or healed. Many adult children still carry scars from childhood, especially if they felt their parents were too strict, too controlling, or emotionally unavailable. And even when you believed you were doing the best you could, your child may have experienced those moments as pressure, fear, or a loss of safety. This emotional memory doesn't disappear with age. It lingers in the subconscious, shaping how they relate to you now. When they distance themselves, it is often a form of self-protection, an attempt to escape emotions they never learned to process, not a direct rejection of your worth or identity as a parent. Yet beyond personal history, society itself plays a powerful role in widening the gap between parents and children. Because modern culture glorifies independence and subtly teaches that caring for parents is a burden rather than a blessing. The media encourages cutting ties as a symbol of strength and choosing yourself, without acknowledging the heartbreak left behind. Many young adults absorb the belief that emotional boundaries mean avoidance, that healing means disconnecting, and that adulthood means forgetting where they came from. This cultural shift creates an invisible wall between generations, making love feel heavy and responsibility feel old-fashioned. Family conflict adds another layer, because unhealed tension has a long memory. Jung once said, "What is not made conscious appears in our lives as fate." And this is painfully true within families. Past divorces, arguments, betrayals, financial stress, remarriages, or years of silent resentment create emotional cracks that children feel deeply. Even when the conflict is over, the emotional climate it created can linger for decades. Adult children may step away, not because they do not care, but because the atmosphere of the past still feels unsafe or heavy. The problem is that their distance shows up as coldness, while the true reason is unspoken pain. However, another side must also be acknowledged: entitlement and lack of gratitude. Some adult children take their parents for granted, believing they owe nothing in return for the sacrifices made for them. This mindset is fueled by a culture that tells individuals they are self-made, ignoring the love, labor, and sleepless nights that shaped their foundation. When adult children operate from entitlement, they may dismiss their parents' needs, minimize their sacrifices, and behave with indifference or disrespect. This is not a reflection of your failures, but of their lack of emotional maturity and spiritual development. When you place these truths side by side, a larger picture emerges, one that blends psychology with spirituality. Estrangement is not only a relationship issue, it is a mirror showing the unhealed wounds on both sides and the cultural forces that push families apart. Jung's insight invites you to look beneath the surface and ask deeper questions about what pain remains unspoken, what generational patterns remain unresolved, and how both you and your child have been shaped by pressures far bigger than your home. Through the lens of spiritual development, you begin to see that healing starts not by demanding change from your child, but by understanding your own heart, acknowledging what you could not offer in the past, and cultivating compassion for both sides of the story. And from this understanding come the lessons. Do not let your child's distance define your worth. Look honestly at any pain you may have contributed to and offer humility rather than shame. Resist the urge to chase or beg, and instead keep your heart open with dignity. And finally, use this season to grow in your own spirituality, healing your own wounds, so that if reconciliation comes, it comes to a stronger, wiser version of you. Because even if your relationship does not repair overnight, the inner work you do becomes a quiet light that one day may guide your child back, not out of guilt, but out of genuine readiness to reconnect. 3. The Jungian perspective, individuation. Carl Jung believed that every child must eventually separate from their parents to form a true and independent identity. And when you look at this through the lens of spiritual wisdom, you begin to see that this separation is not a rejection, but a natural stage of inner growth. Individuation, as Jung called it, is the lifelong process of becoming whole. And for many adult children, this journey requires creating emotional distance from the place where their earliest patterns were formed. Yet when this natural separation becomes extreme, it does not feel like growth. It feels like abandonment, leaving both parent and child carrying wounds that neither fully understands. And here lies the painful paradox. The same child who once needed you for everything now feels the need to step away from you to find themselves, not because they hate you, but because they are wrestling with parts of their own shadow they discovered within the relationship. This is why Jung said, "The greatest burden a child must bear is the unlived life of the parent," pointing to the invisible, emotional weight children often carry without realizing it. The expectations, the fears, the dreams, and the unspoken pressures that shape them long before they are old enough to choose who they want to be. Many adult children pull away, not from the parent, but from the version of themselves they became in the parent's presence, and the distance becomes a way to escape the emotional script they were handed. A child who grows up feeling unseen may avoid the parent to avoid that feeling. A child who absorbed their parent's pain may step back to stop absorbing it. A child who never found their own voice may need silence to hear it for the first time. But from the parent's perspective, these inner battles look like coldness, disrespect, or indifference, especially when the phone stops ringing or visits become rare. Emotional estrangement is rarely caused by one dramatic moment. It is usually the result of years of unexpressed feelings, misunderstandings, unmet needs, or wounds that were never addressed. And because humans often fear confrontation, many children choose distance over dialogue, believing that space will protect them from old pain. What makes this even more complex is that both sides often feel misunderstood at the same time. Parents mourn the loss of closeness, thinking, "Where did I go wrong?" While children feel overwhelmed by emotions they cannot name, thinking, "I can't go back without losing myself." This silent tension deepens the gap until the relationship feels frozen in place. Jung warned that, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. And this explains why estrangement can become a cycle. Both parent and child repeat emotional patterns without realizing it, and both suffer because neither knows how to break the spell. When children turn away, the act is almost never driven by hate. It is driven by confusion, identity formation, and the deep need to rewrite their inner story without the pressure of old expectations. Yet even in this darkness, spiritual wisdom teaches that separation can create space for awareness. When the emotional noise quiets, both sides can begin to see their own patterns more clearly. Children may realize they are not running from the parent, but from their own unhealed wounds. Parents may recognize that the distance is not punishment, but a call for deeper understanding and gentler connection. And when both sides begin to understand the psychological forces at play, the relationship is no longer defined by blame, but by insight. In this light, estrangement is not the end. It is a painful invitation for both hearts to grow. I'd love to hear your thoughts on how individuation and inner growth have shaped your relationship with your parents or family. Share your experience in the comments below. And if today's message resonates with you, simply type, "I choose my authentic self," to show that you're embracing this Jungian journey with us. 4. The reality of abandoned parents. Many parents quietly confess that the deepest wound in their old age is not illness, poverty, or the slowing of their bodies, but the silence left behind by the very children they raised. Some describe it with a short, heartbreaking sentence, "I raised strangers." Behind those 3 words lies a lifetime of sacrifice, sleepless nights, unspoken worries, and small acts of love that were never recorded but were always given. When an adult child turns away, the parent does not simply lose a relationship. They lose a role, a dream, and a part of their identity. The home they once filled with noise and warmth becomes an echo chamber, reminding them of birthdays, holidays, and ordinary afternoons that will never return. Yet the truth is that this distance rarely forms overnight. It grows slowly from unresolved conflicts, emotional misunderstandings, generational wounds, or the pressures of modern life that push families apart until one day the relationship quietly fractures. Some children carry resentment from the past, from moments when parents did their best but did not know how to meet certain emotional needs. Others become consumed by their own lives, careers, marriages, stress, survival, and gradually drift away without realizing the damage their absence causes. There are also children who disconnect because they feel they must protect their mental health from patterns or expectations they never knew how to navigate. None of these explanations erase the pain of the parent, but they reveal a difficult truth. Many adult children are not rejecting their parents as humans. They are rejecting the unresolved emotional history they feel trapped inside. Carl Jung spoke to this when he said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." Much of the distance between parents and adult children is not caused by hatred, but by unhealed emotional inheritance that neither generation fully understands. But as heavy as this reality is, there is another side, one that many elderly parents slowly discover after the initial shock of abandonment. Some begin to reclaim their inner peace through solitude. They explore hobbies they once loved but never had time for. They join community groups, volunteer programs, or small circles of friends who remind them that companionship can be found even outside of family. Through these activities, parents begin to rediscover the self that existed before the identity of motherhood or fatherhood took over their entire life. They reconnect with forgotten passions, creativity, and personal purpose, realizing that their story does not end simply because a child has stepped away. This quiet return to the self is not a form of giving up. It is a form of returning home. It allows parents to experience a deeper kind of peace, one that arises from being present with themselves rather than waiting for validation or affection that may never come. This journey also reveals a subtle truth. When you stop chasing what is absent, you begin to see the value of what is still present within you. Many parents who once felt hollow eventually find strength in this rediscovery, learning that while the heartbreak of abandonment leaves a scar, it does not have to define the rest of their life. Some even find that solitude opens a door to healing they never expected, helping them grow into a version of themselves that feels more authentic, more grounded, and more at peace than ever before. 5. Transformation through solitude. Solitude becomes a powerful turning point in your life because, as Carl Jung explained, suffering is not just a wound, but a doorway to individuation, the deep inner process where you stop living as a reflection of others and begin to return to your true self. When the noise falls away and you have no one left to impress or perform for, you are forced into an honest meeting with your own soul. And although this silence can feel sharp and uncomfortable, it is often the only environment where real spiritual development can begin. In that quiet space, you start noticing the patterns you used to ignore, the emotional wounds you avoided, and the parts of yourself you buried under responsibility, relationships, and expectations. Loneliness becomes a mirror that shows you where you have abandoned yourself long before anyone else ever did. As you sit with your inner world, something shifts inside you. The pain you once feared begins to reveal its meaning, and the emptiness that felt unbearable starts teaching you what you truly need. Jung believed that this internal confrontation is the heart of transformation because facing your shadow, your fears, regrets, suppressed emotions breaks the illusion that you must stay the same to be loved. When you look inward long enough, you begin to see that solitude is not punishment, but purification, a slow removal of everything false, everything that no longer fits the person you are becoming. This is why people often find unexpected strength in their darkest hours. The silence pushes them to grow roots where they once had only reactions, and in that stillness, wisdom begins to form. Solitude strengthens intuition, deepens emotional clarity, and reveals the quiet truths that constant distraction kept hidden, allowing you to step into spirituality not as an escape, but as a deeper understanding of your own nature. Through this journey, you realize that the loneliness you feared is actually shaping your inner character, helping you reclaim the parts of yourself you abandoned to keep the peace or meet expectations. Every painful memory that rises in solitude becomes an opportunity for healing. Every uncomfortable realization becomes a step toward wholeness. Jung taught that individuation is the slow integration of all your pieces, the light, the shadow, the past, and the future into someone authentic and complete. And solitude is where that integration begins. Your suffering becomes the fire that refines you. Your silence becomes the teacher that guides you. And your spiritual strength grows not from avoiding the darkness, but from learning how to walk through it. The lesson hidden inside this process is simple. When you allow solitude to work on you, it reveals your truth, restores your power, and leads you toward a version of yourself that no longer breaks under pressure, but stands rooted in clarity, purpose, and inner peace. If this message resonates with you, declare your strength in the comments. In solitude, I transform. 6. Coping strategies and healing. Healing from a child's abandonment is not a simple process, but a deep inner journey where the spiritual wisdom of Carl Jung becomes a guide that helps you understand your pain and reclaim your strength, reminding you that the greatest burden a child must bear is the unlived life of the parent, and showing you how unresolved wounds from the past can silently shape the relationship you have with your children. That is why the first lesson is learning to set boundaries, because loving your child does not mean tolerating humiliation, disrespect, or emotional manipulation. And every time you gently but firmly say, I deserve to be treated with dignity, you reclaim a part of yourself that you may have forgotten while giving everything to your family, honoring Jung's teaching that what you allow unconsciously continues until you consciously stop it. Yet even with boundaries, the pain remains heavy until you allow yourself to grieve honestly, letting yourself cry, admit the heartbreak, and speak your truth without shame. Because as Rumi said, the wound is the place where the light enters you, and acknowledging your grief becomes an act of courage that begins to release the weight you have been carrying alone for so long. That honesty naturally leads to the need for connection, because isolation will convince you that you are unworthy. But rebuilding community through friendships, support groups, faith circles, volunteering, or simply opening up to people who genuinely care reminds you that love doesn't vanish just because your child pulled away. This widening circle of support slowly replaces the haunting silence, giving you emotional safety and reminding you that your story continues even when a part of it has been broken. From there, rediscovering your purpose becomes essential, because when children walk away, many parents feel like their entire identity disappears with them. Yet Jung reminds us that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are, meaning that your life still holds meaning beyond the label of parent. This is your invitation to return to passions you once buried: writing, gardening, creating, teaching, learning, traveling, or helping others. And as you pour your energy into something that makes your soul feel alive, you begin rebuilding the self that was overshadowed by years of sacrifice. And through all of these steps, the most transformative layer is learning to seek meaning, not by pretending everything is fine, but by exploring what this pain is teaching you about boundaries, self-worth, forgiveness, compassion, and the unresolved wounds you may still carry from your own childhood. You may find meaning in faith, in talking honestly with God, or in serving others who are hurting, or in creativity as you turn your pain into art, stories, or quiet acts of beauty that restore your sense of purpose. This shift finding meaning where there was only loss turns you into the alchemist of your own soul, someone who transforms heartbreak into clarity and sorrow into growth. As Viktor Frankl wrote, when we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. And through setting boundaries, grieving with honesty, rebuilding community, rediscovering purpose, and seeking meaning, you step out of the role of the abandoned parent and into the role of someone who is healing, awakening, and remembering their own worth. 7. The spiritual lesson behind the pain. When children turn away from their parents, life is not simply closing a door. It is redirecting you back to your own soul, urging you to reclaim the parts of yourself that were forgotten while you were giving, sacrificing, and carrying the weight of everyone else's needs except your own. The heartbreak cuts deeply because it comes from the very people you once held as infants, the ones you stayed awake for, worried for, and protected with everything you had. Yet the deeper meaning behind this pain is that it is not an ending, but a powerful invitation into transformation, authenticity, and freedom from emotional dependency. The silence, the absence, the unanswered calls can feel like rejection, but underneath that pain is a sacred message. You are being called to rediscover your worth beyond your role as a parent, to understand that your dignity and capacity for joy are not determined by who walks away, and to remember that your identity is rooted in something far more enduring than another person's approval. Even when family ties fail, your heart does not lose its value. Your spirit does not lose its shine. This is where spirituality and spiritual development begin to guide you, reminding you that your existence has meaning independent of whether your children stay close or drift far. Sometimes, the absence of loved ones awakens a deeper presence within you, a resilience that only emerges when everything external collapses. You begin to sense that the emptiness is not a void, but a clearing, a space where your soul can breathe again after years of being overshadowed by responsibility and emotional pressure. Through this space, you slowly rediscover the courage to live fully, not as someone defined by others, but as someone who belongs to themselves. As you walk through this emotional valley, you may notice a shift within you. You become less controlled by guilt, less burdened by unspoken expectations, and more able to set gentle but firm boundaries that protect your peace. You begin to understand that love does not mean allowing disrespect, that forgiveness does not require abandoning yourself, and that closeness is not the same as loyalty. You stop asking, "What did I do wrong?" and start asking, "What is life trying to awaken in me through this pain?" When you look at the situation through this lens, the suffering that once felt cruel becomes a teacher that reveals hidden layers of strength, self-respect, and emotional clarity. Gradually, the pain softens and something new emerges. A quiet but powerful recognition that even in the most desolate seasons, your soul is not broken, but being reshaped. You learn that you can live even without constant validation, that you can find joy that does not depend on anyone's presence, and that you can build an inner home no one can abandon. In this way, the very experience that once felt like devastation becomes the beginning of a deeper, wiser relationship with yourself, rooted in spirituality, grounded in self-worth, and strengthened through spiritual development. If today's message spoke to the deeper spiritual lesson within your pain, take a moment to ground that awareness. Comment below. I choose healing to honor your inner growth and encourage others to face their own truth with strength. In the end, Carl Jung's insight reminds us that when adult children turn away, it is rarely about simple disrespect. It is a reflection of unhealed wounds, unspoken pain, and patterns carried through generations. Understanding this truth does not erase the hurt, but it does give you the power to respond with clarity, compassion, and strength. Healing begins when awareness replaces blame, and when love becomes a conscious choice rather than an old expectation. If this message brought you clarity or comfort, please remember to like, share, and subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom. And don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Your journey toward deeper understanding and healing continues here. When the empath heals the core wound, attraction flips instantly. The wound is the place where the light enters you. Rumi, have you ever noticed how, once you begin to heal, the same energy that used to attract pain suddenly starts attracting peace? In today's video, when the empath heals the core wound, attraction flips. Instantly from Spiritual Wisdom, we'll explore why true transformation doesn't begin with changing others. It begins with healing the invisible patterns within yourself. As you rise in consciousness and release the old emotional imprints, you shift your frequency, and everything around you responds. Tell me in the comments, what core wound are you ready to release today? Let's start this journey of spiritual awakening together. 1. The core revelation. Carl Jung observed that when an empath finally heals their deepest psychological wound, the entire nature of attraction transforms in an instant. It's not a slow process, but an energetic shift so sudden and complete that Jung described it as terrifying. This is because the empath's entire vibration changes the frequency that once magnetically pulled in people who reflected their unhealed pain no longer resonates with them. The empath begins to rise above cycles of emotional dependency, toxic love, and subconscious patterns of self-sacrifice. They are no longer drawn to chaos or emotional unpredictability because their nervous system once addicted to it, has learned peace. When this inner calm replaces old wounds, the outer world mirrors that healing, and new types of people start to appear. Those who bring safety, respect, and balance. This transformation is the silent proof that healing is not just psychological, but profoundly spiritual. It marks a spiritual awakening, where the empath no longer seeks validation, but vibrates from self-worth. The heart that once absorbed pain like a sponge now radiates strength and clarity. This is the point where the soul reclaims its power, where what once felt like love born from fear transforms into love born from awareness. The empath's energy field becomes lighter, their boundaries firmer, and their intuition sharper. They begin to recognize that the people and experiences that used to feel like home were actually reflections of their inner wounds. The moment that realization takes root, the old attraction fades, and a new alignment emerges. Jung's insight reveals a universal law of spirituality. When consciousness changes, attraction changes. Healing the core wound is like changing the frequency of your inner signal. Suddenly, only those tuned to your new vibration can find you. This is why the shift can feel disorienting. Familiar connections fall away, and the empath may even grieve the loss of intensity. Yet beneath the discomfort lies liberation. For what once drained their life force no longer holds power. The empath's energy becomes sacred ground, no longer a battlefield of emotion, but a sanctuary of peace. And in that sanctuary, attraction flips instantly, not because the world outside changed, but because the soul within remembered its wholeness. In this state of spiritual wisdom, the empath learns that every wound was a teacher, every heartbreak a path to awakening. Healing does not erase the past, but transforms it into strength. What once drew them into lessons now draws them into purpose. This is the essence of true spiritual awakening, when the light of consciousness replaces the patterns of pain, and the empath no longer attracts from need, but from presence, alignment, and love. Comment below. I am ready to heal my core wound. If you're ready to step into your true power and experience the shift where love, energy, and attraction finally align with your healed spirit. 2. The real core wound. The real core wound of the empath is not trauma or abandonment. It is self-suppression. From a young age, you were told you were too sensitive, too emotional, or too judgmental. And over time, those words taught you to hide your perception and silence your intelligence to preserve relationships with people who couldn't handle being seen clearly. You learned that authenticity might cost you love, so you began doubting your intuition, minimizing your truth, and adapting yourself to fit into spaces that could never hold the fullness of your being. What you didn't realize was that this quiet act of self-abandonment became a pattern deeply woven into your energy. You started to associate love with shrinking and connection with compliance. But true spirituality is not about pleasing others. It's about remembering who you are when you stop apologizing for your sensitivity and start honoring it as your greatest strength. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." When you suppress your truth, the unconscious drives your relationships, pulling you toward those who reinforce your old wounds. You attract people who need your empathy but cannot reciprocate it, who crave your light but reject your clarity. They are drawn to your energy not because they love you fully, but because your silence sustains their comfort. Yet the moment you awaken to this cycle and choose to honor your own truth, the entire energetic dynamic begins to shift. Those who once fed off your self-suppression feel the vibration change because you are no longer an energetic match to their unhealed patterns. This is the invisible moment when attraction flips, when the one who once felt powerless in relationships suddenly becomes magnetic through authenticity and spiritual development. Healing this core wound doesn't mean hardening your heart. It means letting your heart lead with consciousness. You begin to see that your emotions are not weaknesses, but sacred messages that reveal where you've betrayed yourself to keep the peace. Each boundary you set, each truth you speak, and each moment you choose alignment over approval becomes an act of reclaiming your soul. The empath's path of healing is not about changing who you are. It's about coming home to the depth, intuition, and love that were always within you. Through this process, your energy transforms. It becomes lighter, cleaner, and more aligned with divine truth. You stop seeking validation in others and instead find strength in your own presence. You no longer chase connection because you understand that real connection begins with self-connection. And that's when attraction flips in its purest form. The people and situations that once mirrored your pain begin to fall away, replaced by those who resonate with your healed vibration. You stop attracting lessons and start attracting reflections of your growth. You stop begging for love and begin to radiate it. In this state, spirituality and emotional healing merge. You become a living embodiment of balance, self-awareness, and divine alignment. The empath who once dimmed their light to survive now shines unapologetically, and that light becomes both protection and magnetism. The wound that once defined you becomes your wisdom, and the love you once sought from others finally flows freely from within. 3. The victim cycle. Because you doubt your own perception, you keep attracting people who exploit that very uncertainty. Carl Jung, in his profound spiritual wisdom, observed that the empath often lives in a repeating cycle of confusion and self-betrayal. It begins the moment you sense manipulation, a quiet feeling that something isn't right. Instead of trusting that intuition, you question yourself. Then, the manipulator reinforces your doubt, making you believe the problem lies within you. To keep the peace, you suppress your intelligence, silence your inner voice, and shrink your light just to hold the relationship together. And so, the cycle continues until one day, a catastrophic betrayal forces you to see the truth you've been avoiding all along. That betrayal, though devastating, becomes your awakening. You realize that your empathy was never the weakness others made you believe it was. It was your greatest power, misused because you didn't yet understand its boundaries. Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." In that moment of awakening, you stop seeking love in those who drain you and begin cultivating love from within. You start to understand that true peace cannot exist where self-denial lives. What once drew you toward manipulation now repels it because you have healed the part of you that needed saving. Attraction flips instantly, not because others change, but because you have. Your frequency rises, your energy stabilizes, and suddenly you attract people who meet you in truth instead of taking from your light. As you heal, you stop replaying the same emotional script. You no longer feel the need to prove your worth or overextend your compassion to those unwilling to meet you halfway. Carl Jung's teachings remind us that every manipulative relationship was a mirror showing us where we had not yet trusted ourselves. Once you integrate that lesson, the outer world transforms effortlessly. The confusion that once blinded you becomes clarity. The pain that once silenced you becomes wisdom. The empath who once absorbed others' pain begins to radiate stability, authenticity, and quiet power. This shift is not about revenge or distance, it's about alignment. When you finally make the unconscious conscious, the victim cycle ends. The betrayal that broke you becomes the teacher that built you. The same energy that once drew in manipulation now magnetizes genuine connection. You stop chasing what was never yours and start attracting what your healed heart naturally deserves. In the end, when the empath heals the core wound, the entire field of attraction rearranges itself. Those who are drawn to your doubt disappear, and those who recognize your wholeness appear. You realize that love was never about losing yourself. It was about finding yourself through the mirror of your own awakening. Don't forget to subscribe for more spiritual wisdom on breaking free from the victim cycle and stepping into your true power of healing, attraction, and emotional mastery. 4. The clarity event. A betrayal so deep, whether through lies, infidelity, or emotional manipulation, becomes what Carl Jung called the clarity event, a moment when illusion dies and truth is born. The empath, once tangled in confusion and self-blame, suddenly sees everything with unfiltered clarity. Their intuition, once doubted and dismissed, stands vindicated. Yet instead of collapsing, they enter a stillness that feels almost supernatural. They no longer react, they observe. This serenity is not numbness, it is awakening. It marks the beginning of shadow integration, when suppressed intelligence, intuition, and strength rise from the unconscious. Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." In this instant of realization, fate transforms into awareness, and awareness transforms into freedom. The empath, who once poured all their energy into understanding others, begins redirecting that energy inward. This is where spiritual awakening unfolds, not in light alone, but in the meeting of light and shadow. Every piece of wisdom that was buried beneath self-doubt begins to surface. The empath realizes that their empathy was never weakness. It was misdirected strength. They stop trying to fix others and instead begin to heal themselves. What once looked like emotional detachment becomes emotional mastery. The clarity event does not harden the heart, it purifies it. Through this transformation, they embody true spirituality, not blind forgiveness, but the courage to see clearly and love wisely. As this internal shift deepens, the empath's energy changes. The same frequency that once attracted chaos now emits peace, and the universe mirrors that vibration back. The narcissists, manipulators, and emotional takers can no longer find resonance with this new frequency. Attraction flips instantly because energy alignment has changed. Where there was once confusion, there is now coherence. As Jung observed, what you resist not only persists, but will grow in size. By embracing the lesson hidden in betrayal, the empath stops resisting pain and begins transforming it. They recognize that every wound was a teacher, every heartbreak a mirror, revealing what was unhealed within. This clarity becomes their new foundation. They no longer chase love to feel worthy. They radiate worthiness. They no longer seek validation. They embody it. The empath's calmness becomes magnetic. Their silence becomes sacred, and their boundaries become their most powerful form of compassion. Their relationships shift because they now attract what matches their inner peace. This is the divine paradox of awakening. When the empath stops trying to be chosen, they become the chooser. The energy that once pleaded to be understood now stands firm in self-understanding. And in that stillness, love finally finds them, not because they chase it, but because they have become it. This is the essence of the clarity event. The moment the empath transcends illusion, embraces truth, and realizes that healing the core wound is not just recovery, it is rebirth. 5. Shadow integration. In Jungian terms, the shadow is everything we reject in ourselves, and for the empath, it is often the emotional debris of others that has been mistaken for their own. When you finally begin to face that shadow with honesty and compassion, a profound shift occurs. You stop apologizing for your emotions and start reclaiming your strength. This is the moment when spirituality and spiritual development merge, not as abstract ideals, but as lived truth. You begin to see yourself clearly, without shame, and feel deeply, without drowning. Integrating the shadow is not about becoming harder. It is about becoming whole. It is realizing that your sensitivity is not a curse, but a sacred instrument meant to guide you through the world with wisdom rather than fear. As you acknowledge the parts of yourself you once rejected, anger, need, envy, or desire, you no longer suppress them. Instead, you let them speak, learn from them, and release what no longer serves you. When you do this, your energy reorganizes itself. The same vibration that once attracted emotional takers now repels them. Those who seek to use your kindness will sense they can no longer penetrate your field, and those who meet you with respect and emotional depth will feel drawn to your presence. This is what it means to be psychologically complete, a sovereign being with boundaries rooted not in fear, but in clarity. You no longer seek approval to feel safe. You find safety within yourself. You stop rescuing people who refuse to grow and instead hold space for those who rise to meet you. Every emotion that once overwhelmed you becomes a compass. When you feel anger, it points to where your boundaries were crossed. When you feel sadness, it reveals what your soul has outgrown. When you feel joy, it shows alignment. Each feeling becomes a guide toward greater awareness. And this is where true spiritual development happens, not in escaping emotion, but in integrating it. Your nervous system learns calm without repression, strength without armor, and compassion without depletion. You no longer absorb energy unconsciously. You sense it, honor it, and decide what enters your space. This new inner coherence makes you magnetic, because authenticity always attracts what is real. Old patterns dissolve quietly. You no longer chase love, you invite it. You no longer perform to be understood, you speak to be heard. You no longer fear solitude, because solitude becomes sanctuary, a space where your intuition sharpens and your energy restores. You begin to see how every rejection was redirection toward alignment. Every heartbreak was initiation into truth. In this clarity, attraction flips instantly. The connections that drained you lose their grip, and the people who see your light with respect, not hunger, begin to appear. This is the alchemy of shadow work. turning what once felt like weakness into sacred power. Empaths often ask, "How do I start?" Begin with awareness. Name what you feel without judgment. Notice when you abandon yourself to keep peace. Replace reaction with reflection. Practice saying no without explanation. Let silence protect your truth when words are unnecessary. This daily act of self-honoring builds a foundation of self-trust, the cornerstone of any spiritual journey. As Carl Jung said, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. That is your task, to make peace with the darkness within, so that your light can shine without distortion. When you do, your presence becomes your power. You attract not through need, but through alignment, not through fear, but through wholeness. And that is when spirituality becomes not something you study, but something you live, calm, grounded, radiant, and completely free. Leave your like and subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom. And don't forget to activate the notification bell so you never miss new insights on healing and transformation. Type in the comments, "I embrace my shadow and walk in light," to affirm your journey of spiritual integration. 6. The attraction flip. When the empath heals the core wound, everything begins to shift from the inside out. The moment self-awareness blooms, their energy signature transforms into something unmistakably sovereign. Those who once preyed on their kindness suddenly sense that the old access is gone. Their manipulative instincts recoil, as if a predator realizes its prey has grown wings. This is not because the empath has hardened, but because their frequency has changed. Before healing, their aura carried the subtle vibrations of guilt, people-pleasing, and a subconscious desire to earn love through self-sacrifice. That frequency was a silent invitation to the broken and the controlling, to those seeking someone to fix, to feed on, or to validate their emptiness. But the instant the empath integrates their shadow, recognizes their worth, and forgives their past, the entire energetic field recalibrates. What once attracted chaos now repels it, and what once felt distant authenticity, maturity, emotional balance now moves closer as if drawn by gravity. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." This truth becomes evident when an empath awakens to their inner dynamics. They realize that their attraction patterns were not random, but mirrors of unhealed pain. Healing is not just emotional, it's energetic alchemy. When the empath stops vibrating in the frequency of lack, they stop being a mirror for others' wounds. Their presence becomes a frequency of clarity, and clarity is powerful. Those who thrive on manipulation can no longer resonate with that vibration. It exposes their illusion, and so they naturally drift away. Yet this departure is not loss, it's liberation. The empath's energy becomes a light too bright for deceit and a haven for authenticity. The emptiness that follows is sacred space, preparing them for relationships that mirror peace instead of pain. This is the essence of the attraction flip. The empath no longer seeks validation through fixing others, but radiates self-respect and spiritual wisdom. They begin to attract those who meet them in wholeness, souls who are emotionally responsible, self-aware, and genuine. Jung compared the meeting of two personalities to the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. Once the empath transforms internally, the chemistry of their connections must change. Manipulators sense no reaction anymore. The empath's healed boundaries neutralize their control. Instead, the relationships that now form are based on mutual growth, not dependency. The dynamic shifts from saving to sharing, from draining to sustaining. The attraction becomes an act of resonance, not rescue. This transformation is not gradual, it's instant and energetic. The moment the empath chooses self-awareness, the shift is already in motion. Spiritual wisdom reminds us that energy precedes form. So when your vibration changes, your reality must follow. What you attract becomes an honest reflection of who you've become. Healing the core wound means you no longer live as a magnet for pain. You become a magnet for truth. And as your energy aligns with authenticity, the universe rearranges itself to meet you there. The broken will fade, the balanced will arrive, and for the first time, you'll experience love not as struggle, but as flow. 7. The pitfalls Jung warned about. Carl Jung once revealed that the path of spiritual awakening is not a straight line toward light, but a dance between awareness and shadow, between the soul's expansion and the ego's subtle disguises. The first trap he warned about is the inflation trap, where new insight turns into a crown for the ego. You begin to see through illusions, to understand truths others might miss, and suddenly a quiet thought arises: they're blind, and I see. This illusion of superiority is dangerous because it replaces genuine humility with spiritual arrogance. You start to measure worth by awareness, creating invisible distance between yourself and the world. True spirituality, however, is not about being above others. It's about remembering your shared humanity. The more you awaken, the softer your heart should become. The more you understand, the less you need to prove. Awareness is not meant to inflate the self, but to dissolve it, to help you see that enlightenment and compassion must walk hand in hand. Then comes the withdrawal trap, where the soul, frightened by pain and misunderstanding, begins to mistake solitude for safety. You retreat from people, from noise, from connection, telling yourself it's spiritual protection. But Jung taught that the psyche grows through relationship, that the mirror of others reveals what still lives in our unconscious. Isolation can become a disguised form of fear, a fear of being triggered, seen, or wounded again. Yet it is in those very reflections that the alchemy of transformation occurs. Spiritual awakening doesn't ask you to hide from life. It asks you to meet life with presence. It's not about building walls, but learning how to keep your inner peace even when surrounded by chaos. Protecting your energy should never mean denying yourself the experience of being human. And perhaps the most beautiful, yet deceptive, is the helper's high. The deep satisfaction that comes from giving, healing, and guiding others. At first, it feels noble, even divine. You become the light for those in darkness, the comforter for those in pain. But over time, the need to help becomes your identity, and your worth becomes tied to being needed. Jung saw this as another shadow of the healer archetype, a self that gives endlessly to avoid facing its own emptiness. You begin to fix others to avoid fixing yourself, to love others to avoid truly loving who you are. Genuine service, however, arises from overflow, not depletion. It's when your inner cup is full, when love flows freely without condition, that your energy truly heals. Helping others should not replace your own life. It should enrich it. Each of these traps the inflated ego, the fearful withdrawal, and the overextended healer exists to test your depth of awareness. They ask whether you are ready to live your spirituality, not just understand it. They challenge you to embody balance, to walk as both human and divine. Jung's wisdom reminds us that awakening is not about escaping the world, but about becoming more deeply alive within it. The light you seek is not above your shadow. It is hidden within it, waiting to be integrated. And when you face these traps with honesty, awareness transforms from a concept into a living presence, one that breathes through you, loves through you, and expresses itself as pure being. 8. The integrated empath. A healed empath is love with boundaries, the embodiment of balance between compassion and self-respect. They care deeply, but protect themselves absolutely, no longer confusing self-sacrifice with love or guilt with responsibility. Through spirituality and deep spiritual development, they've learned that empathy isn't about absorbing pain, but about witnessing it without losing themselves. Their empathy has evolved into a sacred discipline, a conscious act of awareness, not an unconscious reaction to others' emotions. They engage consciously, staying grounded in their truth, and choose connection that uplifts rather than drains. Healing the core wound, that hidden belief that love must be earned through suffering, flips the entire energetic dynamic of attraction. Suddenly, what used to pull you toward chaos now repels you. And what once felt boring peace, mutual respect, emotional safety, becomes magnetic. You stop chasing those who mirror your pain and begin attracting those who mirror your wholeness. When your vibration no longer stems from fear or abandonment, you no longer tolerate emotional manipulation. Your energy starts communicating before you speak, silently setting boundaries that words once failed to protect. This transformation doesn't come from isolation, but from sacred solitude, the kind that rebuilds your soul's foundation. In solitude, you learn to hear your own frequency again. You practice shadow work, where you integrate what was once rejected, and creative expression becomes the language of your healing. The healed empath understands that solitude is not loneliness. It is communion with one's higher self. They cultivate psychological integrity by standing still in the storm, learning that presence is their power. The more they embrace silence, the clearer their intuition becomes, guiding them toward alignment rather than attachment. Through this process, every emotional trigger becomes a teacher, not a threat. You begin to see pain as a portal, a chance to reclaim lost fragments of your soul. Integration replaces avoidance. You no longer fear your darkness, because you understand it's the soil from which your light grows. This is true spiritual development, the union of shadow and light, empathy and boundary, love and wisdom. The empath who once absorbed everyone's energy now channels it with intention, transforming chaos into clarity. They no longer seek validation, for they've discovered that real love doesn't demand self-erasure. It celebrates authenticity. When this inner alchemy occurs, attraction flips instantly. You no longer resonate with relationships built on trauma. You attract those built on truth. The empathy that once made you vulnerable now becomes your greatest strength, a strategic, conscious force that allows you to sense, understand, and lead with heart. You see clearly, but do not absorb blindly. You love fiercely, but do not lose yourself. You stand as both healer and guardian of your energy, embodying the divine lesson that to love others fully you must first honor yourself completely. When you finally heal the core wound, everything changes not because the world outside shifts, but because your energy no longer vibrates with pain. You stop attracting what once hurt you and begin magnetizing what aligns with your healed soul. Remember, true attraction is born from inner peace, not need. If this message resonated with you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our upcoming videos on healing, self-mastery, and spiritual awakening.